Just want to mention what Andy read. I thought that was cool because that's one of my favorite parts of the Bible. I try to read that over and over. Matthew, it's pretty cool. Like Matthew 5, 6 and 7, you get like a big chunk of just Jesus' words that you can read. But it always helps me to think of like who he was speaking to, because there was a crowd there, and I didn't always have that in my mind while I was reading it. I was thinking of my life now, the way things are now, which of course God's word always can apply to us now, but many of those people, they were poor in spirit, they were poor physically, maybe homeless. They were all those things because they were following Jesus. They saw him as valuable enough to leave their home, family, comfort of whatever they were doing, and that's why they were in that position. And to the world, it probably looked like they were not very blessed. They're like, man, this guy can make food out of thin air, but you guys don't have a place to stay. You're just walking around, sleeping, sleeping wherever, making tents. But Jesus always provided for them what they needed. They were truly blessed, and I think all those people understood that they weren't living for now, right? God's kingdom wasn't to be now. He was speaking of a day when there'd be no sickness, where there'd be no pain, where there'd be no sorrow, all these things that we face today. He didn't come just to take all that stuff away. If he did, then he didn't do a good job, because we all have sickness, we all have struggles, right? But he came to give us himself, and that's kind of what the message is going to be about today. So if you want to open to John chapter 6, I'm going to try to read. I might just read the whole thing. It's a little bit long, but I'm going to kind of focus in on just the first part of it. But the title for the message is just that Jesus came to be bread. He didn't just come to give bread. He did that too, right? But that wasn't his main goal. He wasn't like, there's some people that are hungry, I'm going to give them some physical bread, and I'm going to go back up to heaven. That wasn't his main goal. His goal was to give us himself. And you can even see through his life, he was tempted. The devil was trying to get him to not do that. He said, I'll give you all the kingdoms of the world if you just worship me. But we know that he was supposed to gain the kingdom of the world by dying and taking our place. And Satan was trying to stop him from doing that, give him the easy way out. But thankfully, he didn't do it. He came to be our sustenance, our replacement, our everything that we need. And so I'm just going to go ahead and start reading this, and then I'll go back through and stop at some spots. But this is really interesting stuff. The pinnacle of this verse, if you want to write this down or just think of like the focus of the message, is verse 35. So John 6:35, it says, Jesus said to them, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall never hunger, and whoever believes in me shall never thirst. That's repeated more than once in here in this chapter, but just kind of think about that while I'm reading all the rest of this. So John chapter 6, starting in verse 1. After this, Jesus went away to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias. and a large crowd was following him because they saw the signs that he was doing for the sick. Jesus went up on the mountain, and there he sat down with his disciples. Now the Passover, the feast of the Jews, was at hand. Lifting up his eyes then, and seeing the large crowd that was coming towards him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread, so that these people may eat?" And he said this to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. But Philip answered him, 200 denarii worth of bread would not be enough for each of them to get a little bit. One of the disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There's a boy who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, but what are they for so many?" And Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." Now there was much grass in the place, so the men sat down, about 5,000 in number. Jesus then took the loaves, and when he had given thanks to God, he distributed them to those who were seated. So also the fish, as much as they wanted. And when they had all eaten their fill, he told his disciples, "Gather up the leftover fragments, that nothing may be lost." So they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets with fragments from each 5 barley loaves that were left over that had not been eaten. When the people saw the sign that he had done, they said, "This indeed is the prophet who is to come into the world." Perceiving that they then were about to come and make him be king by force, Jesus withdrew again to the mountain by himself. When evening came, his disciples went down to the sea to get in the boat and start across the sea to Capernaum. And it was getting dark, and Jesus had not yet come to them. The sea became rough because of the strong wind that was blowing. When they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus walking on the sea, coming near the boat, and they were frightened. But he said to them, "It is I, don't be afraid." And then they were glad to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat was at land, to where which they were going. So we got some teleportation right there. On the next day, the crowd that remained on the other side of the sea saw that there had been only one boat there, and that Jesus had not entered the boat with his disciples, but that his disciples had gone away alone. Other boats from Tiberias came near the place where they had eaten bread after the Lord had given thanks. So when the crowd saw that Jesus was not there, nor his disciples, they themselves got into the boats and went to Capernaum looking for Jesus. They're basically hunting him down at this point. He doesn't even want to see these people. When they found him on the other side of the sea, they said to him, "Rabbi, when did you come here?" Jesus answered them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, you are seeking me not because you saw signs, but because you had your fill of the loaves. Do not work for food that perishes, but for the food that endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man will give to you. For on him God the Father set his seal." Then they said to him, "What must we do to be doing the works of God?" But Jesus answered them, "This is the work of God, that you believe in him who he has sent." So they said to him, "Then what sign do you do so that we may believe in you? What works do you perform? Our fathers ate the manna in the wilderness, as it is written, he gave them bread from heaven to eat." And Jesus said to them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, it was not Moses who gave you the bread from heaven, but my Father. He gives true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is he who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world." Then they said to him, "Sir, give us this bread always." And Jesus said to them, "I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger, and whoever believes in me shall never thirst." And I'm just going to stop right there because I'm already thinking about too much stuff. I don't know if we'll get through the whole thing, but I got a few things to point out in here. But this is interesting. Like, there's a lot going on here. We have a crazy miracle of Jesus walking on water, right? And then you also have this crazy storm, and Jesus gets in, and then all of a sudden they're at land. That's another crazy miracle. And then when the people ask him what happened, he doesn't mention any of that. He's just like, "You guys are only looking for me because you want more food." And I think that's pretty interesting because he was definitely not doing those signs to impress people or to try to gather more people to follow him. So the first verse that I want to look at is verse 11. So let's go back to that. It says here, "Jesus then took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those that were seated." And I wanted to point out this verse because right here we have Jesus thanking God for something that looks like it isn't enough. And I think that's pretty easy to apply to our own lives. There's a lot of things that we may have or not have, and in our own heads we're like, well, God, I could see a way better way for you to do all this, so I'm not going to thank you. I'll thank you once everything looks like it's going according to my plan, or it'll work out in a way that I can understand. But Jesus, he takes this food, and we know it's not enough. He's got a few loaves, there's thousands of people, a few fish. But he thanks God for it, and then the miracle happens. God multiplies it. And I think that's just good to know, because a rich person is truly somebody who is just content with what God has given them and trusts God to provide them what they need. It's very easy to see what somebody else has and focus on that, or to see how you think your life could be better and focus on that. But back to the point of this message, Jesus came to be bread, not to give bread, right? If he wanted to, satisfy those people and just be like, all right, we're going to go into the market and we're going to buy all the bread that they have. We're going to go fishing till we have enough fish for everyone and just provide that way. But Jesus is trying to give these people himself. He's trying to say, I'm your savior. I'm here to redeem you, restore you, buy you back from the world. But they're not getting it. They're just seeing the stuff. Then let's go to verse 13. Here it says, so they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves left to those who had eaten. Have any of you guys ever thought this was weird? Or is it just me? I've always not understood this. Been like, okay, like, why is that significant? But I think I understand why now. How many disciples did Jesus have?
12.
How many baskets were left over?
12.
And how many people were truly following Jesus? 12. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're his disciple, there's always going to be a basket for you. Right? That's pretty cool, because they're on the sea, they're facing all this stuff, and Jesus has already given them just what they need, right? They didn't have a hotel room to stay in for the night. Like, it wasn't easy necessarily. But he gave them a basket. He gave them what they needed to get through to the next day. So then let's look at verse 15 here. It says, perceiving then that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, Jesus withdrew again to the mountain by himself. So here's the thing with this, right? These people were seeing Jesus as useful, but not precious. They're thinking he would make such a good king. He can give us bread whenever we want. He can make us fish dinners whenever we want. He can walk on water. He can do all this stuff for us. But they're not seeing him for who he truly is. They're looking for an earthly kingdom right now. And Jesus primarily came to give us himself, right? Not to just give us a good life here now on earth. Because we all have problems. And if you don't have any problems, you won't grow. You won't become like Jesus. Jesus had to endure the cross, and if we're supposed to be like him in every way, we're going to be having, elements of our selfishness crucified as well if we're healthy Christians that follow Jesus. So that's not his main goal. His main goal is to give us himself. And so he doesn't want these kind of disciples, right? Like he's like, I got to get away from these people. They don't get it. They don't appreciate me. They don't want my gift of salvation. They're just hungry. They're looking for more dinners from me. So pretty interesting. You'd think Jesus would be trying to get the biggest crowd he could possibly get or whatever, but that wasn't what he came to do. Then verse 21, let's go down to that one and take a look at that. All right, this says, then they were glad to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat was at land, which they were going. And this is another thing that I've always thought was weird, right? I mentioned, is this the first time people heard about teleporting or something? Because the boat's just at land all of a sudden. And obviously the author is not trying to focus on the storm or how they made it back or whatever. I think the point of this being in here is it says, then they were glad to take him into the boat. Like, they were seeing Jesus for who he was, right? Like, they took him in. They're like, this is who we need. We need Jesus. And then they're back at land. And so I think there's something to that. It doesn't seem like they're trying to scientifically explain here how that happened. It doesn't seem like it's the point. The point is that the disciples were glad to take Jesus into the boat once they realized who he was. And I think there's significance to that. Let's go to verse 26. And this says, Jesus answered them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, you are seeking me not because you saw signs, or you are seeking me not because you saw signs, but because you ate your fill of the loaves. Do not work for food that perishes, but for food that endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man will give to you. For on him God the Father has set his seal." Then they said to him, "What must we do to be doing the works of God?" Jesus answered them, "This is the work of God, that you believe in him who he has sent." So I think that's interesting, right? They're looking, what do we do, right? A lot of people come to Jesus and they're like, what do I do to be good? But we know that we're not saved by what we do, right? Our works are not what save us. So Jesus answers them, but it's kind of funny. He answers them like backwards. He's like, the work you have to do is believe that I'm he. That's not physical work, right? That's not donating to charity. That's not praying and reading your Bible every morning for every day that you're on earth. That's just simply something that you do because you see who Jesus is. If you see who Jesus is, you can believe he is who he said he is, and you can trust him to forgive your sin, and you can give your life to him and follow him because you actually see who he is. But that's not something you do by working or earning it. It's just something you do by having your eyes open to who Jesus is. Then you can believe, and then you can put your whole trust in him. So yeah, they're not getting it. They're still thinking it's about some kind of work. And Jesus is trying to say, no, you guys aren't seeing this right. So let's look at verse 32. It says, Jesus said to them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, it was not Moses who gave you the bread from heaven, but my Father." And so, they're kind of trying to come back to Jesus with the story of the manna. And Jesus is saying, you guys are thinking Moses did this. You're thinking Moses gave you this sign, but it actually was my Father in heaven. And I heard a guy give an analogy on this that I really liked. It's like you have this beam coming down from heaven where they're having this food and they're having this provision, but then all the people are just looking at the food. They're like, oh man, this is awesome. I was so hungry. What is this, sourdough? Whatever. They're looking at that, but they're not looking up the beam to the sky to where God is and recognizing like, oh, God did this for us. He's the one that provided for us. And it's the same with Jesus here, right? Like he's doing these miracles. He's obeying his Father. He's doing his will. But everybody is kind of just seeing the result of it and not that it was God's heart to like care for them and do this. And it can be the same in our lives. Like we could pray for, like for example, when I was younger, I remember praying for a car when I was 16. I want to have enough money to buy a car that works and be able to drive and do all this stuff. And I prayed for it, and then my auto mechanics teacher sold me a car for $300, and he helped me fix it up. And it was awesome, but after that happened, I kind of didn't think about God again at all. I was just like, sweet, got the car, now I can go to work, do my thing. And that's what we do a lot in our lives, is we forget to look at what's actually happening, who's looking out for us, and recognize that that's all coming from God. When we're in heaven, we'll be able to recognize like everything good we ever had in life or ever thought about or enjoyed, it's all from God. It's a result of God. But it's hard here and now because we get distracted, we get focused on ourselves, and it just makes it tough to recognize God providing. It's hard to sometimes thank him for normal stuff too, like, oh, I have clothes to wear, I have shelter. A lot of people don't have that stuff. If you drive around downtown, it's pretty easy to see there are a lot of people that they don't have these things that we do, and we never even thank God for them most of the time. So it's important to have that time by yourself. You see Jesus, he's overwhelmed. He goes up the mountain, even in this story, and he spends time with God. He focuses back on God. And so I just want to encourage you guys, we're going to have to do that too. There's going to be times where everything sucks in your life and you're frustrated, and you might be like let me go on Google and see if I can get this or that, or have some advice from a book or whatever. But really, a lot of times we just need to connect back with God. If Jesus is really the bread, if he came to be our sustenance, we need to go to him. I was talking to Sarah earlier about how sometimes it feels like we're starving ourselves and we don't know what's going on in our life, why things aren't going well. Because we're eating all this physical food, we might be getting rest, we might be having things go well, but if we're not eating of the bread of life, if we're not partaking in the meal of Jesus himself, he gave his body for us, if we're not recognizing that, then everything else is kind of dull. It's hard to enjoy anything because you're not realizing, oh man, all my sins were forgiven. Think about that. No amount of money could buy that. That's crazy. You know, all that stuff being wiped away, God in his goodness took our place and took the punishment for our sin, wiped it away so that we don't have to endure that. Money can't buy that. That's amazing. No matter how bad of a day you're having, you can thank God that he's forgiven you and he's restored you. But we just don't look up, right? We get the blessings and sometimes we focus on that, but we forget to look up and recognize that God did that for us. And, you know, God does care about our body, right? He does care about our stomach. He did give the people food. He gave them bread, he gave them fish, but his primary goal was for them to see him. Like Jesus came to say, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. No one gets to the Father but through me. He came to say, I am the way. So he does care about, like, you know, your job and your food and all that, but his primary mission when he came to earth was to say, come to me. Because you could have a great, amazing life and completely miss God and then be separated from him. And God doesn't want that. He loves us, he cares for us, he wants us to know him. And so like Andy reading Matthew 5 earlier, I think that's awesome. I think the best thing you can do is just get to know Jesus. If you're going to spend all of eternity with him, you should start getting to know him now. You know, you read Matthew 5, 6, and 7, you get a whole bunch of Jesus' words recorded right there that you can soak in, and you can pray, and you can sit with him even in silence and just get to know him. And that makes it really exciting for one day when we're not here on earth anymore, since all this stuff is temporary. And Andy, I'm glad you're still here. I'm sure that you would love to be in heaven right now, but I'm glad that you're that you're here, and for however more time, you know, God has for you. But it is awesome though, right? That like this earth, the end of all these hardships, it's the glory of God that we get to be with him and enjoy him forever. And you know, we need to remember that because things are hard sometimes, you know, especially when you're not getting sleep. And being a new dad, I'm learning all about not sleeping. And so I have to still take that time. And yesterday I was looking for a moment to just prepare a message. And every time I would sit down, I'd set the baby down, and then he'd start to cry, or I'd just hear a giant fart in the distance, and I know I gotta change this diaper. And so it's at the end of the day, and then I sit down, and I'm about to go try to put him down, and then he just falls asleep on my chest. And then on my phone, like I'm looking at the Bible app or whatever, and then this message just came from that. And so God provided it. But it wasn't because I spent so many hours doing it or whatever. I thought I was going to take this time to have a big Bible study and do all this stuff, but being a new dad, didn't get that time, but God gave me just enough time. My son fell asleep on my chest. The message came and I wrote it down, and I'm really grateful that God provided that. And then when Andy wanted to share, I didn't know that, and that just kind of lined up perfectly with this, because those are hurting, broken people that Jesus spoke those words to, but they also were rich people, right? They were blessed people. Jesus called them blessed. And so even if some physical stuff's breaking in your life, I know Bill, your car broke down, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and so that's a bummer. That's why, you know, Dave and Kayla weren't able to be here, because Bill gives them a ride every week, which is awesome that you do that, Bill. But sometimes stuff like that happens. And when it happens, you know, try to think of the version of yourself that is instead thanking God. You know, God, thanks for all the times that my car did work. Thank you that I have a car. Thank you that, I can get in the AC when it's molten lava hot outside, or whatever. Think of a version of yourself that can believe Jesus' words and actually, take to heart that he said you're blessed even when you're struggling. It's not easy to do, but I feel like the more you read Jesus' words and the more time you spend with him, it starts to get easier, because, Jesus, he was sorrowful for, people that died, and for, the Pharisees and Sadducees that didn't understand things, but he also had great joy. He came down out of joy, died for us. He knew it was going to be awful. He sweat blood. He had all these awful things that he went through on earth, just like we do. But it said, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, despising the shame. And so he had joy to come do that for us, to come die for us, and to come provide for us and be the bread of life for us. And so when I remember that can help me. Getting sleep is great if you can do it. Having money is great if you can get it. All these things are fine. God doesn't want you to be starving or not have money. But he wants you to have money as if you didn't, right? If you have money, he wants you to be cool with giving it away. He wants you to be able to, somebody that's famous, God's not against that, but you should count yourself as not famous if you are. Well, hey, this is just a temporary thing. This is on earth. If I can use this for God's glory, I will. But to want those things for yourself, it will only corrupt you. If I have a lot of money without God, I'm going to probably be more selfish and do more things for me because I have all the opportunity to now, And that's sometimes why God doesn't let us get all the stuff we want, because he knows it won't be good for us. But he does want us to be blessed. And so I heard somebody say about this passage here, Jesus, he wanted to be bread for these people so bad that he was willing to take the physical bread away from them, right? So he didn't keep feeding them. He didn't say, I'll just feed you guys for the next couple months since you're here. He was like, you're not getting it. I'm trying to give you me. I'm the bread of life. I want you to feast of me. And so he took away that bread to try to see if they would get it. And 12 of them did, but the rest, we don't know. Maybe later on they understood, maybe they didn't. The Bible doesn't say. But it says, I think it's John 6:66, I'm not sure, but it says, basically they all left at a point. They were like, he's not doing what we want anymore. He's kind of saying some hard stuff. He's telling us to eat his flesh and drink his blood. This is kind of weird. Don't know if we like this guy anymore. I'm going to check that verse real quick just to see if
That's right.
It is right? Okay. Yeah, so we got to take part with him, and that's part of communion as well. Just like that reminder that he did say, eat from me, come partake in me. I'm here for you. And I just want to say one last thing, and then I'll close. You guys know the parable with the two brothers, the prodigal son. So you have the one brother, right, that he left. He took his inheritance. He partied, he had prostitutes, whatever. Then you have the other brother that's there, and he's not happy, right? When the brother comes back and the father's like, let's throw a party for him, let's give him a ring, let's give him a coat. The other brother's not happy, right? And why is that? Does anybody have, why do you guys think the other brother wasn't happy when his, the prodigal brother came back? Why was he not happy? Anybody know? Sarah?
He's thinking, I've been here this whole time, honoring you and obeying you. And you're going to throw a big party for the brother who, deconstructed, defected, and rebelled against you. So, yeah, he was pretty upset and disgruntled about it.
Yeah. And then what does the father say after that? Does anybody remember? I'm paraphrasing this, not pulling the passage up, but he says, my son, all I have is yours. Come, eat from me, take from me, I'm here. But the son doesn't see it. The father's there the whole time, but the son doesn't see it. He's like, I want to have a relationship with you. I want to throw you a party. You never asked. He says, you never asked me. So don't let that be you. God is always there for you. But you can go to all these other things. You can get angry because other people are blessed or God's forgiving them and you don't think they deserve it. But God's saying, come to me, eat from me. Everything I have is yours. And so I just want to end with that. There's going to be struggles, there's going to be hardship, but if we go to him and we actually trust him to be the thing that sustains us, then we're going to just be completely at peace. And so remember, God has that basket for you. If you're his disciple and you're following him, he's giving you everything you need in that basket. He set it aside for you. And when it doesn't look like it's enough, thank God anyway. That's what Jesus did. He had this tiny little couple loaves of bread and fish. Didn't look like enough, and he thanked God, and God multiplied it, and there was just enough for all the people, and including the disciples, to have what they needed for the next day. So just remember that. God's always there. He's always there, but it's on us to go to him. There was two people on the cross next to Jesus, right? And Jesus didn't say, you guys gotta believe in me. Please, this is your last chance, believe in me. He waited for the man to turn to him. The man turned to him, and he said, today you'll be with me in paradise. And it's because of God's goodness. That man didn't live a good life. He didn't figure it all out. He just trusted God. So when things are hard, look to him. Because he's the only one that's going to get you through it and it's going to save you. You can't do it on your own. And sorry, that's it. But thank you guys for listening.